Okay, let's dive into this fascinating source you've shared. It's from the YouTube channel, a lecture part of a Bible Humanities series.
Right, and our goal today is to really get under the hood of this material. The source argues, pretty compellingly I think, that Moses' law wasn't just, religious rules. It was a practical system designed to tackle real-world problems head-on.
And what jumps out immediately is how it frames Moses himself, not just the spiritual figurehead we usually picture.
Exactly. It presents him as someone who spent, the source says 80 years, grappling with very practical issues.
80 years is a long time to think about problems.
And the system he developed, according to this analysis, has this really specific focus: economics, economic justice for the most marginalized people back then, the Habiru.
That's the angle that really caught my eye, the Habiru. So, the central question we're exploring based on the source is, what was the original point of the Sinai Law? How does this view challenge how it's often seen?
Yes. The source makes a very strong case that the original purpose is widely misunderstood. It argues the core is fundamentally economic, aimed at building a specific kind of just society.
Okay, let's get right into that. The source challenges that common perception, right? The one that sees Mosaic law as mainly rituals, religious rules, maybe a rigid system that's often contrasted with grace or faith.
It does, and it makes a crucial distinction. It separates the original law, given at Sinai, the one Moses received, from the much more complex regulations that developed way later.
Like in post-exilic Judaism.
Precisely. Think about those incredibly detailed Sabbath rules, or the complex purity laws that came later. The source argues that criticisms, even significant ones like from the Apostle Paul, were often aimed at those later developments.
Not the original foundation.
Not the core Sinai law itself. That's the argument.
That distinction feels important. It resonates with how Jesus talked about fulfilling the law, not abolishing it. Suggests we need to be clear which law we're talking about.
Exactly. And this source's central argument is, unequivocal. It states the core, the absolute essence of the original Sinai law, is definitively about economics.
Not primarily spiritual or ritual.
Its foundational purpose, the source claims, was securing economic justice for the most vulnerable. That was job number one.
And this leads to that concept you mentioned, the Habiru Code. Explain that a bit more.
Well, the source argues Moses' fundamental goal was creating a nation without ingrained status discrimination, without huge wealth gaps. It saw economic stability and equality as the real solution.
So the law becomes a kind of rule book for the marginalized.
In a sense, yes. A code for the Habiru, the landless, the vulnerable, designed specifically to guarantee their rights, to ensure they had a path out of hardship. The source even uses a specific term, ro-ha, referring to this system or code for the Habiru.
Wow, and framing it like that, considering the time period, around 1500 BC.
It makes it seem like, almost social system engineering. The source definitely presents it as showing incredible foresight, practical insight, way beyond just spiritual guidance.
Okay, seeing the law as this Habiru code is a major reframing. So, if the purpose was economic justice, how did the law do it? What were the actual mechanisms?
Right, that's the next layer. The source looks at things like the Sabbath, the Sabbatical Year, the Jubilee Year, not as separate rules, but as interconnected parts of a system for redistribution and empowerment.
Let's start with the Sabbath. We think of it as rest, right?
It is rest, but the source emphasizes it was mandated rest for absolutely everyone. Owner, slave, hired hand, even the animals.
Everyone, no exceptions.
No exceptions. And crucially, the source argues it was more than just stopping work. It was a guaranteed day every single week for scattered families to reunite. Think of laborers, maybe maids, living away from home.
So it was built-in community and family time. Guaranteed.
A mechanism for restoration mandated weekly. That's the source's take.
That adds a whole different dimension. Okay, then the longer cycles. The sabbatical year, the seventh year, the year of remission. How does that fit the economic justice picture?
This is where it gets really concrete. The source connects it directly to slave liberation. Slaves were freed after 6 years. That's known.
Right.
But the truly radical provision, according to the source, the game changer, was that they were not just sent away. The law mandated they be given a substantial payment.
Mandated, not just suggested. A lump sum.
A required lump sum, calculated based on their 6 years of labor. Essentially, yes, severance pay, or seed capital.
Yeah.
Back in 1500 BC.
Severance pay. That's incredible. What was the point of that?
The source is very clear. It was a deliberate, practical measure, required by law, designed specifically to break the cycle of poverty. to prevent them from immediately falling back into debt and potentially re-enslavement.
So giving them a real foundation.
Exactly. The capital needed to actually start becoming self-sufficient. The source really highlights how revolutionary this was.
Capital's one thing, but in that kind of society, land is everything, isn't it? The means of production. How did the Jubilee year, the 50th year, address that?
The Jubilee. The source presents this as the most radical piece of the whole system. It tackled the land issue head on.
How so?
It states unequivocally that any land sold because of economic hardship, debt, poverty, whatever this created, forced the sale automatically returned. Automatically and free of charge to the original family or tribe in the 50th year.
Wait, free of charge? No buyback, no cost? It just reverted.
That is precisely what the source maintains. It was the ultimate safety net, designed specifically to stop families from being permanently dispossessed.
To prevent land concentration.
Exactly. To ensure that even after terrible hardship, a family wouldn't permanently lose their basic means of survival, their ancestral land.
So the source isn't just seeing these as separate laws, sabbatical severance, jubilee land return. It's arguing they were meant to work together.
Absolutely. The source states clearly they were linked parts of one sophisticated system. Think about it. The severance pay provided the capital.
Right, from the sabbatical year.
And the land return provided the means of production.
From the jubilee year.
That combination, the source argues, was essential. It was designed to create the conditions for genuine self-reliance, a real chance at a fresh start for those who had fallen on hard times. It wasn't random. It was an integrated system for protecting the vulnerable and keeping society stable.
That framing is, quite powerful, seeing them as interconnected economic tools. Okay, this leads us to the third big insight from the source. Moses' role in all this. It says he wasn't just taking dictation.
Not at all. The source analyzes this and contends Moses struggled with these problems for 80 years, it says, actively searching for developing these solutions himself.
So it really emphasizes the human effort involved.
Very much so. It highlights human agency, the active role people play in identifying real-world problems like deep inequality and figuring out how to solve them.
Okay, but where does God fit in then if Moses was doing the problem-solving? Was it just human effort?
The source suggests a different view of the divine role. Less like a dictator handing down rules, more like a supporter, an enabler.
How does that work?
The idea is when humans, like Moses, work hard towards solutions that align with what are understood as God's core principles, like justice, equality, caring for the vulnerable, then God empowers those human efforts, helps bring them to fruition.
So it's human initiative and struggle meeting divine support when it's aimed correctly.
That's the picture the source paints. It even uses that vineyard analogy. God is the farmer, Jesus the vine, humans the branches. And it points out, where does the fruit actually grow?
On the branches.
On the branches, on us. The fruit, the real-world change, the actual solutions, comes through human effort and implementation. That's where the tangible results happen.
And the source gives this perspective a name, right? Contrasting it with another view.
Yes, it calls this reality-engaged approach Hebraism. And it contrasts it with what it terms a more Hellenistic perspective, which it suggests might overemphasize the purely spiritual or maybe lead to passively waiting for God to fix things.
So Hebraism is about getting your hands dirty, engaging with the messy reality.
That's the idea. The source advocates for returning to this original Hebraic viewpoint that gives profound value to real life, to material well-being, to economic issues. Hebraism, in this view, is about realizing justice right here, in the world we live in, not just hoping for it somewhere else.
Okay, let's try to summarize the core takeaways from this deep dive into the oak source. First, the essence of Mosaic law, according to this analysis, is definitively a system for economic justice, specifically for the marginalized, the Habiru. The source even calls it the Habiru Code, or
a system with concrete, practical mechanisms.
Exactly, like the sabbatical year's mandated severance pay, providing capital, and the Jubilee year's free automatic land return, providing the means of production. These are presented as integrated tools, not isolated rules.
Tools designed explicitly for redistribution and enabling self-reliance.
And third, this whole system isn't just seen as a top-down divine decree. It's understood as the result of Moses' intense 80-year human struggle and problem-solving effort.
An effort that was then empowered by the divine because it aligned with principles of justice and equality.
And the overall message emphasizes returning to this Hebraic focus on real-world tangible justice, particularly economic justice, as central.
It definitely offers a powerful and perhaps provocative reinterpretation. viewing ancient law through this lens of practical social and economic engineering.
It really does. So here's something to think about, a question prompted by this source. If the root of this ancient law contains such clear, definite, and frankly radical principles of economic and social justice, things like mandated severance and free land return for the vulnerable, how might reflecting on that spirit, that intent, inform how we think about our own modern challenges? Issues like inequality, poverty, access to resources today. What connections, or maybe even lessons, could we draw from these ancient ideas for our world now? Definitely something to mull over as you continue your own thinking.